Welcome you all in BBA and MBA Guide by Samaya Hamid. Today is the 7th lecture about management. The topics we are going to cover today are role of manager, external environment and effects of external environment on manager.
Role of manager.
Manager is a person who is responsible for controlling or administering an organization or group of staff. So, how much difference does a manager make in how an organization performs? The dominant view in management theory and society in general is that managers are directly responsible for an organization's success or failure. We call this perspective the omnipotent view of management. Differences in an organization's performance are assumed to be due to decisions and actions of its managers. Good managers anticipate change, exploit opportunities, correct poor performance, and lead their organizations. When profits are up, managers take the credit and are rewarded with bonuses, stock options, and the like. When profits are down, top managers are often fired in the belief that new blood will bring improved results. For instance, the CEO of Koch Corporation was fired because some of its largest customers were threatening to leave and the company's share prices had declined sharply. In this view, someone has to be held accountable when organizations perform poorly regardless of the reasons, and that someone is the manager. Of course, when things go well, managers also get the credit even if they had little to do with achieving the positive outcomes. This view of managers as omnipotent is consistent with the stereotypical picture of the take-charge business executive who overcomes any obstacle in seeing that the organization achieves its goals. And this view isn't limited to business organizations. It also explains turnover among college and professional sports coaches, who are considered the managers of their teams. Coaches who lose more games than they win are usually fired and replaced by new coaches who are expected to correct the poor performance. In contrast, others have argued that much of an organization's success or failure is due to external forces outside managers' control. This perspective is called the symbolic view of management. In the 1990s, Cisco Systems was the picture of success. Growing rapidly, it was widely praised by analysts for its brilliant strategy, masterful management of acquisitions and superb customer focus. As Cisco's performance declined during the early part of the 21st century, analysts said that its strategy was flawed, its acquisition approach was haphazard, and its customer service was poor. Was declining performance due to the manager's decisions and actions, or was it due to external circumstances beyond their control? The symbolic view would suggest the latter. The symbolic view says that a manager's ability to affect performance outcomes is influenced and constrained by external factors. According to this view, it's unreasonable to expect managers to significantly affect an organization's performance. Instead, performance is influenced by factors over which managers have little control, such as the economy, customers, governmental policies, competitors' actions, industry conditions, and decisions made by previous managers. This view is labeled symbolic because it's based on the belief that managers symbolize control and influence. How do they do that? By developing plans, making decisions, and engaging in other managerial activities to make sense out of random, confusing, and ambiguous situations. However, the actual part that managers play in organizational success or failure is limited according to this view. In reality, managers are neither all-powerful nor helpless. But their decisions and actions are constrained. As you can see in the diagram, external constraints come from the organization's environment and internal constraints come from the organization's culture.
External environment.
The term external environment refers to factors and forces outside the organization that affect its performance. As shown in the diagram, it includes several different components: economic, demographic, global, political, legal, technological, and socio-cultural. The economic component encompasses factors such as interest rates, inflation, changes in disposable income, stock market fluctuations, and business cycle stages. The economic vocabulary includes terminology such as toxic assets, collateralized debt obligations, TOB, bailouts, economic stabilization, wraparound mortgages, and stress tests. To understand what this economic environment is like, we need to look at the changes that have taken place and the impact of those changes on the way organizations are managed. The demographic component is concerned with trends in population characteristics such as age, race, gender, education level, geographic location, income, and family composition. Baby boomers. Gen Y, post-millennials. Maybe you've heard or seen these terms before. Baby boomers are those individuals born between 1946 and 1964. So much is written and reported about boomers because there are so many of them. The sheer numbers of people in that cohort means they've significantly affected every aspect of the external environment, from the educational system to entertainment lifestyle choices to the social security system and so forth, as they cycle through the various life stages. Gen Y, or the millennials, is typically considered to encompass those individuals born between 1978 and 1994. As the children of the baby boomers, this age group is also large in number and making its imprint on external environmental conditions as well. From technology to clothing styles to work attitudes, Gen Y is affecting organizational workplaces. Then, we have the post-millennials, the youngest identified age group, basically teens and middle schoolers. This group has also been called the I generation, primarily because they've grown up with technology that customizes everything to the individual. Population experts say it's too early to tell whether elementary school-aged children and younger are part of this demographic group or whether the world they live in will be so different that they'll comprise a different demographic cohort. Demographic age cohorts are important to our study of management because, as we said earlier, large numbers of people at certain stages in the life cycle can constrain decisions and actions taken by businesses, governments, educational institutions, and other organizations. But demographics doesn't only look at current statistics, it also looks to the future. For instance, recent analysis of birth rates shows that more than 80% of babies being born worldwide are from Africa and Asia. And here's an interesting fact. India has one of the world's youngest populations with more males under the age of 5 than the entire population of France. And by 2050, it's predicted that China will have more people aged 65 and older than the rest of the world combined. The political legal component looks at federal, state, and local laws, as well as global laws and laws of other countries. It also includes a country's political conditions and stability. The socio-cultural component is concerned with societal and cultural factors such as values, attitudes, trends, traditions, lifestyles, beliefs, tastes, and patterns of behavior. The technological component is concerned with scientific or industrial innovations. And the global component encompasses those issues associated with globalization and a world economy.
How the external environment affects managers.
Knowing what the various components of the external environment are and examining certain aspects of that environment are important to managers. However, understanding how the environment affects managers is equally as important. We're going to look at 3 ways the environment constrains and challenges managers. First, through its impact on jobs and employment. Next, through the environmental uncertainty that is present. And finally, through the various stakeholder relationships that exist between an organization and its external constituencies. Jobs and employment. As any or all external environmental conditions, economic, demographic, technological, globalization, etc., change, one of the most powerful constraints managers face is the impact of such changes on jobs and employment, both in poor conditions and in good conditions. The power of this constraint became painfully obvious during the recent global recession as millions of jobs were eliminated and unemployment rates rose to levels not seen in many years. Not only do changes in external conditions affect the types of jobs that are available, they affect how those jobs are created and managed. For instance, many employers use flexible work arrangements to meet work output demand. For instance, work tasks may be done by freelancers hired to work on an as-needed basis or by temporary workers who work full-time but are not permanent employees or by individuals who share jobs. Keep in mind that such responses have come about because of the constraints from the external environment. As a manager, you'll need to recognize how these work arrangements affect the way you plan, organize, lead, and control. Environmental uncertainty. Another constraint posed by external environments is the amount of uncertainty found in that environment, which can affect organizational outcomes. Environmental uncertainty refers to the degree of change and complexity in an organization's environment. The matrix in Exhibit 2 to 3 shows these two aspects. The first dimension of uncertainty is the degree of change. If the components in an organization's environment change frequently, it's a dynamic environment. If change is minimal, it's a stable one. A stable environment might be one with no new competitors, few technological breakthroughs by current competitors, and little activity by pressure groups to influence the organization, and so forth. For instance, Zippo Manufacturing, best known for its Zippo lighters, faces a relatively stable environment, with few competitors and little technological change. The main external concern for the company is probably the declining numbers of tobacco smokers, although the company's lighters have other uses and global markets remain attractive. In contrast, the recorded music industry faces a dynamic, highly uncertain and unpredictable environment. Digital formats and music downloading sites turned the industry upside down and brought high levels of uncertainty. If change is predictable, is that considered dynamic? No. Think of department stores that typically make 1/4 to 1/3 of their sales in November and December. The drop-off from December to January is significant. But because the change is predictable, the environment isn't considered dynamic. When we talk about degree of change, we mean change that's unpredictable. If change can be accurately anticipated, it's not an uncertainty for managers. The other dimension of uncertainty describes the degree of environmental complexity, which looks at the number of components in an organization's environment and the extent of the knowledge that the organization has about those components. An organization with fewer competitors, customers, suppliers, government agencies, and so forth faces a less complex and uncertain environment. Organizations deal with environmental complexity in various ways. For example, Hasbro Toy Company simplified its environment by acquiring many of its competitors. Complexity is also measured in terms of the knowledge an organization needs about its environment. For instance, managers at E*Trade must know a great deal about their internet service providers' operations if they want to ensure that their website is available, reliable, and secure for their customers. On the other hand, managers of college bookstores have a minimal need for sophisticated knowledge about their suppliers. How does the concept of environmental uncertainty influence managers? Looking again at Exhibit 2 to 3, each of the 4 cells represents different combinations of degree of complexity and degree of change. Cell 1, stable and simple environment, represents the lowest level of environmental uncertainty, and Cell 4, dynamic and complex environment, the highest. Not surprisingly, managers have the greatest influence on organizational outcomes in Cell 1 and the least in Cell 4. Because uncertainty poses a threat to an organization's effectiveness, managers try to minimize it. Given a choice, managers would prefer to operate in the least uncertain environments. However, they rarely control that choice. In addition, the nature of the external environment today is that most industries today are facing more dynamic change, making their environments more uncertain. Managing stakeholder relationships. What makes MTV a popular cable channel for young adults year after year? One factor is its success in building relationships with its various stakeholders, viewers, music celebrities, advertisers, affiliate TV stations, public service groups, and others. The nature of stakeholder relationships is another way in which the environment influences managers. The more obvious and secure these relationships, the more influence managers will have over organizational outcomes. Stakeholders are any constituencies in the organization's environment that are affected by an organization's decisions and actions. These groups have a stake in or are significantly influenced by what the organization does. In turn, these groups can influence the organization. For example, think of the groups that might be affected by the decisions and actions of Starbucks, coffee bean farmers, employees, specialty coffee competitors, local communities, and so forth. Some of these stakeholders also, in turn, may influence decisions and actions of Starbucks managers. The idea that organizations have stakeholders is now widely accepted by both management academics and practicing managers. Exhibit 2 to 4 identifies some of an organization's most common stakeholders. Note that these stakeholders include internal and external groups. Why? Because both can affect what an organization does and how it operates. Why should managers even care about managing stakeholder relationships? For one thing, it can lead to desirable organizational outcomes such as improved predictability of environmental changes, more successful innovations, greater degree of trust among stakeholders, and greater organizational flexibility to reduce the impact of change. But does it affect organizational performance? The answer is yes. Management researchers who have looked at this issue are finding that managers of high-performing companies tend to consider the interests of all major stakeholder groups as they make decisions. Another reason for managing external stakeholder relationships is that it's the right thing to do. Because an organization depends on these external groups as sources of inputs, resources, and as outlets for outputs, goods and services, managers need to consider their interests as they make decisions. This is all about today's lecture. Hope you find this video useful. If you find any query, you can ask by commenting below. Please share this video with your friends and fellows. And don't forget to like and subscribe the channel.